what's interesting is studies that have looked at the physiological response to eating certain foods in healthy individuals versus those with IBS. So I love talking about this study. So basically, they took a group of people. Half the people had IBS, half the people were like healthy individuals, and they essentially fed those people the same meal. And then they did MRI scans of their bowel. And what they found was that in both groups, they had a pretty similar amount of gas production in the gut and a very similar amount of increased intestinal fluid. So whenever we eat something, fluid is drawn into our bowel to help us like digest that food. So both groups had a very similar production of gas and fluid. But then when they did the symptom severity questionnaires on the two groups, it was the group with IBS who were reporting a significant increase in things like abdominal pain and bloating. And so what this study shows is that it's the increased sensitivity of those gut muscles which is triggering the pain. It's not actually like an increase in gas or an increase in water.
And
It's
then the alert goes through to your brain to register it as pain, discomfort in
exactly,
that way.
exactly, exactly. And so, disorders of the gut-brain interaction occur like, when we put on like a pair of glasses or we put on a watch and like your brain registers that sensation, but then after about a nanosecond, you forget about it because it's just a normal response. Or disorders of the gut brain interaction start to like notice those sensations as like an issue. And then you get this kind of vicious cycle of like symptoms and then worsening pain and then worsening stress and then worsening symptoms. And that's why practices like yoga, meditation, breathwork can kind of help to break this stress symptom cycle.
So then going back to the mental health element of that, you have a stressful time and therefore you have these manifestations, these symptoms. Is that then the cause of these symptoms that increases the mental health implications, or is it mental health that causes the gut? Do you know what I mean? What I'm
Yeah,
trying to say?
like
Where does it go?
a chicken and egg scenario. Which came first?
Mhm.
And we can't say for certain, and it's different in everyone.
And when you say mental health, are we talking just anxiety, which is stress a lot of the time? Or are we talking like depression, or like how severe are we talking?
Yeah. Obviously, mental health is a very broad
Yeah.
spectrum. In this context of IBS and what I'm talking about in particular, stress, anxiety, although there was a study that looked at clinical depression, and this really goes to show the impact of food and diet on mental health conditions like depression. So it was a study called the SMILES trial. So the SMILES trial essentially investigated that very question, like how much can diet impact our mental health? And again, they took a group of people with clinical depression and they randomized them to one of two groups. So one of those groups received social support and counseling, which we know is a really useful strategy to help manage depression. And then the other group received sessions with a clinical dietitian, I think 3 sessions over 12 weeks. And the aim of those sessions were to essentially improve the healthiness of their diet, which involved following more of a Mediterranean style diet. So, increasing their intake of plant based foods like fruits and vegetables, whole grain carbohydrates, beans, pulses, and lentils, nuts and seeds, healthy fats from avocados, olive oils, oily fish, whilst also decreasing their intake of these more unhealthy, ultra processed foods like cakes, biscuits, takeaways, fried foods. And at the end of the 12 weeks, the results were quite astonishing because the group who had received the social support and counselling, 8% of that group had achieved complete remission of their depression, meaning they were no longer depressed, which is amazing. But when they looked at the group who had changed their diet with a clinical dietitian, almost 33% of that group had
Wow.
achieved complete remission of their depression, meaning they were no longer depressed. And the greater degree of dietary change, the greater the improvement in their depression scores. So that massively shows how impactful diet can be at influencing our mental health. But I guess back to the question of like which came first, the chicken or the egg, it's difficult to say because someone who suffers from anxiety and depression may have a poorer diet quality and therefore worse gut health. And then therefore that kind of feeds into the cycle, but it's difficult to obviously say which came first.
Yeah. And why does a poorer diet, so we have the processed foods, the unhealthy sugars, and all of these things, why does that actually impact? Because we know that obviously it's not good for our guts and good for our health. We might put on weight. Is it those manifestations that can impact our mental health? It's quite shocking actually that how changing to this Mediterranean diet for a fairly short period of time can have such an impact in this study. Can you talk me through actually like what happens when we indulge in these a long term of these unhealthy diets and how it can impact our brain?
Yeah. Well, I guess if it works, to talk about, I guess, what it is in a Mediterranean diet that
Mhm.
benefits our mental health. So kind of talking about it from the flip side.
Be a bit more positive.
Yeah. So when we look at kind of what that Mediterranean style diet is, like I said, it's increasing your intake of plant-based foods. And the
Mhm.
backbone of all plant-based foods is dietary fiber. So
Everyone loves fiber at the moment. It's having its moment.
everyone loves fiber. It's my favorite F word, like I always say. um, and fiber feeds our gut bacteria, and not only is it beneficial for our gut health and our gut bacteria and our gut microbiome, but I think an 8 gram, I think the stat is an 8 gram increase of dietary fiber per day can reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes. I forget by what percent, but reduce your risk of coronary heart disease and also reduce your risk of colon cancer. So, and in the UK, we should be consuming at least 30 grams of fiber per day, but it's estimated that adults are consuming only between 12 to 18 grams. So we're really falling short. And to increase your fiber intake, it's not too difficult. We're talking about like half a can of chickpeas, or even
Yeah.
like a handful of nuts as a snack, or an additional 2 portions of fruit per day.
Yeah.
But fiber is what our gut microbes love. And when we break down and digest dietary fiber, we produce these compounds called short chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate being the three main ones, which are these compounds which get sent to our brain health, our heart health, our skin health, and have kind of the biggest impact. With dietary fiber, the aim is to eat a variety. So you may have heard of the term like 30 plant points per week.
Yeah.
So it's recommended to try to eat 30 or more different plant-based foods per week. That number came from a large study called the American Gut Microbiome Research Study, where they analysed the gut microbiome of thousands of people across the UK, the US, and Australia. And what they found was those who ate 30 or more different plant-based foods per week had a far more diverse gut microbiome compared to those who ate less than 10. And so you really just need to think of each different plant-based food as one point, and even herbs and spices count towards a quarter of a point, because quarter of a point just because we eat them in smaller quantities. That's what you really want to be aiming for in terms of like diversifying your diet to not only improve your gut health but also like your mental health as well.